The National Desk, America's News, now.
From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. First, warning label demand. Just how many state attorneys general are calling on Congress to add them to social media apps. A weight loss drug shows promise for kids as young as 6. The pros and cons of the research aimed at reducing childhood obesity, protecting Ukraine's fragile energy grid as a harsh winter fast approaches, the new plan from Capitol Hill in hopes of saving countless lives. And later, celebrity endorsements can make or break a candidacy. We look at the most famous backers and who appears to be making an impact. But first, the city of Springfield, along with several other cities, are grappling with how to handle an influx of migrants. As Christine Frizzell explains, it's a challenge now squarely in the spotlight thanks to the 2024 presidential election.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
A viral moment from this week's presidential debate about an online conspiracy theory with no evidence to back it up. But those who live in Springfield say there are major issues related to the influx of migrants, local schools overwhelmed, not enough housing, and a healthcare system fighting to keep up.
Springfield's hospital and healthcare systems have seen a dramatic influx of new patients, increasing the need not only for healthcare, but also for translation services.
In Springfield, Ohio, as many as 15,000 have come from Haiti over the last 3 years, fleeing political violence and hunger, and enticed by a Biden administration program giving many temporary protected status, drawn to the region as word has spread.
I have a friend here who told me that I can get a job here. And I tell another friend and another friend tell another friend that that's the way we get here.
While there are indications the influx of migrants has also benefited Springfield's economy immensely, local leaders are begging for federal help. Similar situations in big cities like New York and Chicago, where local leaders have had to slash city budgets that provide services to residents to help care for migrants, as leaders from suburbs like Aurora, Colorado also sound alarm bells. Videos like this allegedly showing members of a violent Venezuelan gang terrorizing those who live in local apartment complexes.
And I think there's a possibility if we don't proactively get out in front of this, which I think we're already behind, we're going to see this gang spread faster across the country than we saw with MS-13.
Former President Donald Trump back in Arizona Thursday. His campaign says he went to highlight Kamala Harris's devastating border policies. Yet another example of how immigration is likely to remain a top issue on the 2024 campaign trail between now and Election Day. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National Desk.
New details. Almost 60 million people watched this week's debate between former President Trump and Vice President Harris. That's 10 million more than this cycle's first debate between Trump and President Biden. The all-time debate watch record is 84 million. That's how many people tuned in to the 2016 clash between Trump and then Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. Important to note, this week's numbers do not include streaming. House Speaker Mike Johnson suffering a setback on Capitol Hill, pulling a spending bill hours before a planned vote on Wednesday. The bill faced stiff opposition from his own party. Johnson says he'll try to build support throughout the weekend. The bill would have extended government funding for 6 months beyond the September 30th deadline to give lawmakers more time to settle on new spending levels. The government will run out of funding if he can't get it done before the end of this month, weeks before this year's election. Attorneys general for 42 states have signed a letter to Congress demanding a Surgeon General warning label on social media apps. They say the algorithm-driven social media platforms threaten the safety of young adults and feed the mental health crisis. Several states have already taken legal action against a number of social media companies, including Meta and TikTok. But the attorneys general say more action is needed. A weight loss drug approved to treat obesity in adults is also safe and effective for kids as young as 6 years old. That's according to a new study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. The National Desk Jeff Harris spoke with experts to find out more.
I'm told the drug called Saxenda has been around for a while. The FDA first approving it to treat obesity in adults back in 2014. And researchers now say it's effective for children as young as 6 years old. Devin Lavender, a professor in the College of Pharmacy at the University of Georgia, tells us in this study, over 80 kids, none older than 10, and all of whom had at least a body mass index of 31, used Saxenda for a year.
As we've seen with all the other GLP-1 weight loss medications, there was a reduction in BMI from baseline at the end of the trial period.
Similar to other weight loss drugs on the market, Lavender says months after the trial ended and the kids stopped taking the drug, the weight returned.
When the drug is stopped, the weight does come back.
C. Michael White, a professor in the College of Pharmacy at the University of Connecticut, says during the study, some kids did experience side effects.
80% of kids had some upset stomach, some had vomiting, a few had diarrhea.
But since this is the first published study involving kids, White says it's not yet known if taking the drug at such a young age will impact growing bodies.
But what happens when they're receiving therapy for 10 years, for 15 years, for 20 years? We just don't have that kind of data set.
Lavender also adds that compared to other weight loss drugs, one drawback of Saxenda is that it isn't a weekly injection.
You can imagine, having to give a very young child a daily injection.
Now, the trial has been extended to include more treatment and follow-up. Results are expected to come out sometime in 2027. I'm also told, like other weight loss drugs, Saxenda likely would not be covered by insurance. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says America will send $700 million in aid to bolster Ukraine's power grid ahead of what is expected to be a harsh winter. Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukrainian energy infrastructure and airstrikes. Some of the aid will also fund shelters, healthcare, and education programs for Ukrainians. There's mounting evidence a woman executed in the U.S. for espionage in the 50s was not, in fact, a Russian spy. A recently declassified memo sheds new light on Ethel Rosenberg. She and her husband Julius were convicted of conspiring to steal secrets about the atomic bomb for the Soviet Union. A top U.S. government codebreaker determined Ethel knew about her husband's involvement but did not contribute. Her sons say she should be exonerated. Right now, the trial for 3 former Memphis police officers charged in the 2023 beating death of Tyree Nichols is underway. In opening statements, prosecutors said the ex-officers, quote, stood by his dying body and laughed. The defense argued the officers acted in accordance with their training. I want to warn you, some of the video that you're about to see may be hard to watch, so take a minute to look away if you need to. The federal trial on civil rights and obstruction charges is expected to last at least 3 weeks. 2 other officers have already pleaded guilty to the federal charges. The 5 officers also face second-degree murder charges in state court. The University of Pennsylvania says it will no longer make socio-political statements with some caveats. The policy follows a similar move by Harvard University. The new rule makes exceptions for local or world events that have a direct or significant bearing on university functions. It follows the president's resignation last year after she received criticism for her comments in a House hearing on anti-Semitism. Global pop superstar Taylor Swift has spent the week urging Americans to vote and has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for president. I'm with the fact check team's Janae Bowens. A lot of people holding their breath waiting to see if she actually would do this, and we know that she has spoken about voting at the MTV Video Music Awards Instagram as well. Looks like with interest in the election, too, the impact was immediate.
Exactly, Dee Dee, and she has influence and nearly 300 million Instagram followers. A General Services Administration spokesperson told me in just 24 hours, more than 400,000 visitors flocked to vote.gov from the custom URL by Swift earlier this week. The day before Swift shared that link, the site only had 30,000 visitors, so that's a significant boost.
Yeah, clearly a lot of eyes on her. This time isn't the first time that Swift Swift has used her influence in the political space, right?
Exactly. So last September, Swift posted this on her Instagram story, encouraging people to register to vote at vote.org. The results were the site getting 13,000 users every 30 minutes.
Wow. In just a few minutes, Janae will join us again to discuss how effective celebrity endorsements really are. Right now, more younger Americans are opting out of becoming parents, due mainly to finances. That's how 23% of Gen Z and millennials answered a new MassMutual survey. Another 31% don't plan on kids due to the social and political world they would inherit. The two most common motivations cited in the poll to remain child-free were financial freedom and the inability to afford children. A reminder to check yourself and your pets for seed ticks if you're spending time outdoors. Seed ticks are in the larval stage of their life cycle just after hatching. They can be as small as the head of a pin, often making them hard to see. Despite their size, they can still attach to humans and animals, potentially spreading illnesses like Lyme disease or alpha-gal. Straight ahead on the National Desk on Welcome Eavesdropping. Your smartphone can hear you, but where does that information go? Cybersecurity expert Lisa Garber weighs in. Plus, inflation slows down, but prices are still high. The latest reading on the economy and what it could mean for your wallet. Yes, it's true. Your smartphone can hear you, but is it also spying on you and then sending you a bunch of targeted ads? Joining Jan Jeffcoat to discuss is cybersecurity expert and privacy attorney Lisa Garber.
Independent marketing firm 404 Media reported smartphones are not just tracking your online activity, but also listening to what you say using technology that allows for what's called active listening. So tell us how this tech works and what does this mean for all of us?
I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to most consumers who use a smartphone, but essentially this links your voice data to create a marketing profile for you for seriously hyper-targeted advertising on your cell phone. So potentially taking conversations where your microphone is in use and recording them, anonymizing them, and then linking them so that they can hyper-target ads to you.
Is this use of technology legal?
It depends on the terms of use. Unfortunately, the statistics show that over 90% of Americans do not read the privacy policy or the terms of use when signing up to use different applications, social media platforms, or even their entire cell phone. But the issue is, how much did they know was happening? And right now, we see that Cox Media Group behind this type of software, this type of use of software, worked with Meta, with Google, with Microsoft, with Amazon. And really, these companies are starting to investigate what their relationship looked like. But in the slide deck, Cox Media Group itself says, is this creepy? Yes. But does it work? Definitely. I'm paraphrasing. But essentially, they compare it to a Black Mirror episode. Is your microphone being used to collect this data? In many cases, it really did.
It's a little frightening, obviously. How can we protect ourselves from this?
The best way to protect yourself from this type of hyper-targeted advertising or having your data being used in ways you don't expect it to is to check what the settings are on your phone and within applications. We grant permissions pretty freely in allowing the use of the microphone and allowing use of the camera or access to your personal data on the phone, like your messages or contacts or your calendar. It's always important to check the general settings. It really matters.
And the reason why this is so important is because you feel like you're just one step away from the government being able to hear all your conversations, which some people already think they can anyway. But again, as you said, these are for those targeted ads. And arriving to Apple devices next month is Apple's integration of AI in their systems called Apple Intelligence. Now, this upgrade is going to include features like assisted writing software, upgrades to its digital assistant Siri. How worried, though, should we be about some of these AI advances?
We have to be cautiously optimistic because AI in itself offers so much in terms of making our lives more efficient and effective and offering so many more opportunities. Apple itself, in adopting artificial intelligence, what it's coining Apple Intelligence, is stepping into this field with the context that Apple has always said privacy is a human right. AI in and of itself really isn't a private type of entity, right? We're sharing tons of data in order for it to work, and in order to be targeted for us to be extremely helpful and personalized, it has to consume our own personal data as well, our private information. Apple has set a privacy gold standard, and in starting on this AI path, Apple has opened up its source code for many of these applications and for its software altogether, allowing independent auditors to come in and see how it functions. But really, we're going to have to see how this plays out. And remember, when you buy the new iPhone or update your phone, Apple has said this will become part of its foundational ecosystem. So they're really including this in everything it does moving forward.
And then you have to wonder, too, what privacy policies will Apple have to protect users' data when interacting with Apple Intelligence devices?
And all of these features are not opt-in or opt-out. The default is you are opted in. And Apple has set a privacy gold standard. I don't want to let that fly under the radar. But artificial intelligence itself has had a bad rep in terms of how it processes our data and what it's keeping private.
Cybersecurity expert and privacy attorney Lisa Garber, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us here on the National Desk.
Thank you.
In your money, Americans saw their incomes rise 4% in 2023 from 2022 despite inflation. The median household income was $80,610. That's the first statistically significant increase since 2019. Americans' finances are a top issue in this year's election. Former President Trump argues people were better off under his administration, while VP Harris says she's focused on the middle class and cost of living. A fresh reading of consumer inflation is building the case for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates when they meet next week. The rate of inflation continues to slow down, but actual prices are still painfully high for many Americans. The National Desk's Acha Elanashar takes a closer look at the numbers.
The rate of consumer inflation continues to slow down, now almost to a rate economists consider normal, 2.5%, the lowest reading since February 2021, thanks to price declines for things like used cars, grocery staples, and a big one, energy. The average price for a gallon of gas is $3.25, according to AAA, 58 cents less than this time last year. But the cost of housing and going out to eat is still climbing. Airfare also rose last month.
Welcome to you both.
Inflation and the economy remains a top concern for voters.
We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Republicans on Capitol Hill Wednesday using a hearing about food and energy costs to blame the Biden-Harris administration for the high inflation of the past 3.5 years.
The upper class, the middle class, the lower class, they're paying more and getting less under the Biden-Harris agenda.
While the White House is emphasizing the progress made to bring down inflation and raise wages.
Wages are beating prices and the buying power of Americans' paychecks is going up.
The political debate tends to be about where the economy has been. The debate among bankers and investors on Wall Street is all about where the economy is going. And on Tuesday, the CEO of the country's biggest bank, JP Morgan Chase, said, "I would say the worst outcome is stagflation, recession, higher inflation. And by the way, I wouldn't take it off the table."
But Bank of America's CEO says their data does not suggest that's coming.
What we see as a consumer activity is consistent with a low growth, low inflation economy and has stabilized.
Their analysts expect the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates by 1/4 point when they meet next week. And when they're done with cuts for this cycle, perhaps by 2026, interest rates will still be higher than they've been since 2006 or 7.
And those rates, that's actually a good thing because that's more normal environment. We can't have a low rate structure. It means that the economy isn't performing.
But for now, for the next 8 weeks, how the economy performs could impact how the candidates perform. In Washington, I'm Atrell Nishar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Ahead on the National Desk, tightening school security, the technology one Virginia district is using to protect its students this year. Plus, wildfires spreading across the West Coast right now. The new technology in Oregon helping first responders pinpoint those in harm's way. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Virginia, where one school district is implementing new security protocols aimed at giving students peace of mind.
Prince William County Public Schools are implementing new security protocols this year.
With people, and especially our age with teenagers, it can get scary sometimes with like lockdowns and things like that.
Students like Olivia McBride say they have one last thing to worry about as a new weapons detection system is installed at every school building in the county.
So as you can see, I just walked through the system and I had a potentially threatening item on my person. I'm actually carrying what we call a dummy or demo weapon that is shaped like a handgun. And the system is showing specifically where the threat could be. So what it's looking for are those threatening items of mass casualty type weapons. So we're looking for handguns and different parts and pieces of different types of weapons. Also looking for large tactical knives and for explosive devices.
I think it's the right move in the direction that this country's going. I think it's fantastic. I think it will help students. I think it will help staff.
The Oregon Department of Human Services launched new emergency management software that will help emergency managers better pinpoint areas in harm's way. They say the software will help officials identify and prioritize populations in these areas, ultimately saving lives.
This software speeds that process up immensely. And because fires often cross county boundaries, it also allows counties to work together on the same page to do the best job possible to get timely notifications out to people.
ODHS recommends you sign up on OR Alert for counties you and your loved ones live in. A parks department in Maine is putting out an alert about a deformity that can make geese incapable of flying, threatening their lives. Angel wing syndrome happens when the last joint of a wing becomes twisted, causing the feathers to point away from the body. Veterinarians say the primary cause is people feeding the waterfowl excess amounts of bread.
The feathers are growing kind of faster than the bones that should be supporting that wing. So that's what causes that angel wing shape.
Feeding geese small amounts of lettuce and grapes can be better for them, but the Parks Department says the best solution is to not feed them at all. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. We'll be right back after this. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. Catherine, Princess of Wales, says she has completed her chemotherapy treatment. In the months ahead, the princess says she plans to gradually return to public life. And Ryan Seacrest stepped in as the host of Wheel of Fortune for the first time this week. He says he's hosting Wheel of Fortune and it is a dream job, and he knows he has big shoes to fill. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Developing news, the Campbell's Soup Company wants to drop soup from their name to be known as Campbell's Company as more people reach for snacks and ditch ready-to-serve soups. The 155-year-old brand has extended beyond soups for quite a while. The company owns brands like Pepperidge Farm and Goldfish Crackers. The move isn't final yet, as it will need shareholder approval. Last year, Campbell's snack sales grew 13%, while its soups grew 3%. The infamous Fyre Fest in 2017 fell so far short of its promises that its name has become a cultural shorthand for epic disaster. But that isn't stopping founder Billy McFarland from trying again. The convicted fraudster tells NBC News Fyre 2 is set for April 25th next year on a privately owned island off the coast of Mexico, insisting he's going about the endeavor professionally this time, while he still continues efforts to pay back the attendees of Fyre 1.
I think it's hard because this is the deeper issue where there are people who were legitimately hurt and let down from Fyre 1. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to repay those people.
McFarland is chipping away at $26 million in restitution for the fraudulent Fyre Fest 1 event. Ticket prices will range from $1,400 to $1.1 million. Ahead in our next hour, a first-of-its-kind report centered on cryptocurrency. The dangerous trend now tied to the investment strategy. You're watching The National Desk, America's News. Now, you can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News, now.
This case is outliving my family, and I hope I live long enough to see justice for my brother Adam.
Remembering 9/11 victims, why grieving families are still frustrated with the U.S. government 23 years later. The U.S. Postal Service is struggling to deliver mail-in ballots on time, why some votes this fall may not be counted at all. Millions of Medicare recipients may have had their personal information stolen. What you can do to make sure you're protected. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect. Starting this week's show with a moment of silence, marking 23 years since September 11th, 2001. Wednesday was a somber day of remembrance across the country for the victims of the 9/11 terror attacks. In Pennsylvania, more than 1,000 people gathered at the crash site of Flight 93, people calling it the first victory in the battle of terror, when passengers on board attempted to regain control of the plane from terrorists who hijacked it. The superintendent of the memorial, Stephen Clark, says fewer generations will remember these heroes, but events like this keep their memory alive.
Despite lacking this lived experience, these young minds come to special places like the Pentagon Memorial and here at Flight 93 National Memorial to learn how the actions of ordinary people have shaped their world.
Officials at the ceremony read the names of the 40 passengers and crew, ringing a bell for each life lost. Similar ceremonies were held in Northern Virginia and New York City. At Ground Zero, victims, survivors, their families, and first responders gathered to honor the lives lost 23 years ago, and in the years later from 9/11 related illnesses. In Arlington, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris rounded out a day of remembrance at the Pentagon's memorial. Former President Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, also visited all three sites today as well. 23 years ago, thousands of Americans died in the worst terror attack on American soil. For those they left behind, it can be hard for the wounds to heal without suitable accountability and justice. The National Desk, Kayla Gaskins, joins us from Washington with more on the frustration aimed at American leaders.
The country marking 23 years since the 9/11 terror attack. Many who lost loved ones that day remained frustrated with American leaders, from insensitive gaffes like President Biden's on Tuesday.
And tomorrow I'm doing 9/11.
Do 9/11, quite a flippant remark. But please remember that the September 11th families live it every day.
To the lack of accountability for those ultimately responsible.
It has been 23 years and the families deserve justice and accountability.
9/11 Families United sending letters to both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, voicing individual frustrations with each party candidate and asking both for a commitment to prioritize transparency and confront Saudi Arabia about new evidence allegedly tying the Saudis to the attacks.
The Saudi government's knee-deep in this thing. Not only lent aid to them, but subsidized them and helped train them to fly airplanes. And we're talking about Saudi government officials.
We spoke with Don Arias, whose brother Adam died in the World Trade Center.
What a great loss for my family, for his community, for our country, that a young man who had so much to offer is gone now.
The 9/11 families have hired their own lawyers and are currently suing the Saudi government themselves.
Our FBI has not been very forthcoming.
Arias is also frustrated. It's been decades, and there still has been no trial for the accused terrorist masterminds sitting in Gitmo.
We fought 2 wars over this damn thing, and no one's been held to task for 9/11 yet.
Justice has taken so long. Arias's mother, father, and sister have all passed away in recent years.
So now, you know, this case is outliving my family, and I hope I live long enough to see justice for my brother Adam.
The 9/11 families had legislation passed by Congress allowing them, private citizens, to sue a foreign government like Saudi Arabia. They now have a new bill aimed at speeding up the justice process. On Capitol Hill, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
The U.S. Postal Service is not ready for the 2024 election. That's the new warning this week from election officials across the country to the Postmaster General. State and local election officials say over the past year, mailed ballots postmarked on time were received days after the deadline to be counted. They add that properly addressed election mail was being returned as undeliverable, something that could send voters to inactive status. The officials say they've repeatedly reached out to the agency to fix the issues with no success. This as the first ballots of the general election are on their way to voters in Alabama. The state started mailing out ballots Wednesday. North Carolina was supposed to start sending out absentee ballots last Friday, but those plans were delayed after RFK Jr. sued and won to get his name off the ballot after dropping his campaign. A new FBI report shows victims of cryptocurrency fraud lost more than $5.6 billion in 2023. That's a 45% increase from losses reported in 2022. The overall increase in fraud was fueled by a jump in crypto-related investment scams. This is the first time the FBI has published a report focused on crypto-related fraud from a larger set of annual fraud data. New data shows there was a slight dip in the number of black students in Harvard University's freshman class. It follows the Supreme Court's decision last year that barred colleges from considering race in admissions. According to data released by Harvard, 14% of incoming students identified as black, 4% fewer than last year. Latino students made up 16% of the freshman class, up 2%, while Asian Americans stayed the same at 37%. China and Russia are conducting joint naval and air drills. China's defense ministry made the announcement Monday, saying they'll take place starting this month, adding the purpose of the drills is to strengthen their ability to jointly deal with security threats. China has refused to criticize Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This week, Francine hit Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle with strong winds and heavy rainfall. I sat down with Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy Dehart, a 53rd WRS aerial reconnaissance weather officer, digging deeper into the science backing the brave men and women who hunt hurricanes. The weather reconnaissance missions that you perform in storms like Francine to gather data really help improve things like forecasts and storm warnings, but you really put a lot on the line to do that. Give our viewers a glimpse of how this all works.
Right. So that is our job, is weather reconnaissance. So what we'll do is whenever a storm forms that the National Hurricane Center recognizes as would potentially have impacts to the United States, our partners, we will be tasked to go fly into that storm, provide real-time data from the storm environment from our aircraft, the WC-130J. We will fly through the storm, not over it, not around it, but we'll fly right through it. And we will, so the airplane, tracks atmospheric data such as pressure, temperature, wind speed, wind direction, humidity, and in real time. And then we'll send that data off the airplane via satellite communication to the National Hurricane Center so that they are getting real-time updates for their forecasts and for the hurricane models to provide better forecasts.
And then that information, of course, critical to people back here at home.
Every storm's a little different. It actually looked like it started out in the southwest Gulf of Mexico, and in the first 24 hours, it really had a period of rather intense intensification, and kind of leveled off there for another 24 hours. But right as it was approaching land in the northern Gulf Coast, it went through a round of rapid intensification. And so you never know with these storms in the Gulf. So we try not to focus too much on the overall intensity and just try to get the data out there, and so that the Hurricane Center can put out their watches and warnings and people are prepared.
Being so close to everything that is going on, what should we expect for the rest of hurricane season? Because it's not even close to being over.
At this point in the year, based off the earlier season projections, I think A lot of people expect it to be a little more active than it has been, but it only takes one. And as we've seen with Francine, we saw with Beryl really early in the year, it doesn't really matter what the rest of the season has done. It only takes one storm to change people's lives.
Right, a critical message. We appreciate what you're doing. Lieutenant Colonel Jeremy D. Hart, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Developing now, nearly 1 million people with Medicare may have had their information exposed in a data breach last year. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services says an unauthorized third party accessed a file transfer system used to handle medical claims. Information like names, addresses, claim numbers, and hospital account numbers could have been stolen in May of 2023. CMS is mailing notifications to people who may have been exposed, giving them a new Medicaid card, as well as offering free credit monitoring for a year. According to a new analysis from the World Health Organization, global cholera deaths skyrocketed last year. The WHO analysis found reported cholera deaths last year rose by 71% compared to 2022. That's despite reported cases only increasing 13%. Cholera is a diarrheal disease that can cause death by dehydration in as little as 1 day. We are just weeks away from the 2024 presidential election, and the race is tight. Both candidates have picked up celebrity endorsements. I'm back with Janae Bowens from the Fact Check team to discuss. So let's start with which stars are rooting for former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, Dee. So Trump's most famous backers include Elon Musk, Hulk Hogan, Kid Rock, Jason Aldean, and Amber Rose. Now, Trump claims Kansas City Chiefs Patrick Mahomes' wife is a supporter, even though she hasn't publicly endorsed him.
We know Taylor Swift is backing Vice President Kamala Harris on the other side. What other A-listers are endorsing her?
Yeah, so it's Megan Thee Stallion, Mindy Kaling, Charlie XCX, George Clooney, Kerry Washington, Ariana Grande, and Barbra Streisand, just to name a few.
As we look to history, how impactful are celebrity endorsements?
Well, they can help, especially if you've got backing from Oprah Winfrey. Now, Winfrey endorsed Barack Obama during the 2008 Democratic primary. A study from the Journal of Law, Economics, and Organization suggests Winfrey's endorsement was responsible for approximately 1 million additional votes for Obama. Now, back then, 8 million people watched her daily talk show, and it's estimated that 16 million people read each issue of Oprah magazine. So it's safe to say not many celebrities could have an impact to this magnitude.
Right, that is certainly significant. Yeah. Janae, thank you. And for more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the fallout from this week's debate to the growing national debt.
Welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump meeting this past week for their first and only presidential debate. Donald Trump announcing Thursday no more presidential debates for him this year. National correspondent Matt Galka, you covered the debate in Philadelphia. What have the candidates been up to since?
Yeah, Steve, for a little bit we didn't know if there would be another debate. They kind of, after Harris's campaign pitched it, Donald Trump said he was thinking about it, but was a little more definitive on Thursday. So taking him at his word, our only chance to see the two on the same stage, and they are not wasting any time after that debate. They're barnstorming the swing states, trying to seize on some of that momentum. Kamala Harris campaigning in North Carolina on Thursday and going back to Pennsylvania, one of the crown jewel states for either campaign. Donald Trump in Arizona, also going in Las Vegas, in the Southwest for some of those Sun Belt states, these crucial swing states that are likely to decide the election. And it's not just the candidates themselves. Of course, their surrogates are out there. Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz, he's hitting some of those Rust Belt states on the campaign trail. And, of course, we see J.D. Vance out and about. So it's all about seizing the momentum now, and with less than 2 months to go before the election, every moment, any moment can be a big moment and maybe even a deciding moment as we get to the home stretch here.
Yeah, and the economy, the top issue for many voters, the candidates continuing to offer up economic proposals that would add to the national debt, which is at $35 trillion and growing. National correspondent Atra Elnishar, what are government spending watchdogs saying about that?
They are urging the presidential candidates to, if they're going to propose things that would add or that would require spending, that they include pay-fors, and also that's the bare minimum, but to also address the national debt, which, like you said, is more than $35 trillion and growing. In fact, by the time the next presidential administration is over, the national debt is set to reach World War II levels. That is not good. And during the debate, the national debt was not brought up at all. Vice President Harris brought up how some of Trump's policies would add to the deficit, but they were not asked, and they did not bring up how they would address this massive issue. So why is it so important? Well, if the national debt is not addressed, Social Security, Medicare, and highway trust funds are set to be insolvent within the decade. That means we wouldn't get those benefits that we pay into. That means our parents wouldn't get those retirement benefits. It would be a disaster, and no one is really talking about it because it's just not a popular thing to campaign on. Because addressing the national debt would require either raising tax revenue, cutting benefits, or a combination of both. So it's a really tough but necessary issue that no one is talking about.
Yeah, another issue that's all over the campaign trail, immigration, a key issue for voters. Donald Trump facing criticism for his comments during the debate about Haitian migrants. But national correspondent Christine Frizzell, there's an underlying immigration-related issue that is concerning elected officials as well as voters affected by surges in migrant arrivals. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, this was a viral moment in last week's debate when Donald Trump talked about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating cats and dogs. Now, let's be clear, there's no evidence that's going on. It seems to be an online conspiracy theory. But what this did is it sort of shined a spotlight on communities like Springfield, Ohio, where you've got, to my knowledge, up to 15,000 people from Haiti. Remember, Haiti is an absolutely war-torn, politically corrupt country right now. They're leaving, and they do have this program from the Biden administration where they can be given temporary protected status, a lot of them coming to Springfield, which there is evidence that they've really helped Springfield's economy, but there is also concerns about the resources that have been drained there, from healthcare to education to housing. Now, there's also concerns about this Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua. Every single person I've spoke to have said not only are they as bad as MS-13, they are likely worse. And what they're doing is they're coming. These people are not showing up at the border asking for asylum. They are sneaking in, trying not to be discovered, taking advantage of an overrun border system. And they're coming in and they're setting up camp here in places like Aurora, Colorado, in Chicago, big cities. There's evidence of these gang members being here. One expert I spoke to said it's kind of like a business venture. They're trying to expand. They're not doing well in their home country of Venezuela. They're finding success here. It's very dangerous. It's very concerning. And that is why this is yet another major issue in this presidential campaign.
And we'll be watching very closely to see what Trump and Harris say about all of these issues in the final run-up to Election Day in November. Christine, Atra, Matt, thank you all for your hard work. Back to you.
Up next, Texas grapples with how to handle religion in the classroom, the fight over whether to include the Bible in reading lessons. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From a California sheriff calling out a new ammo law signed by the governor to a debate over teaching the Bible in Texas classrooms. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start in Maryland, where a man is due in court accused of stealing several traffic speed cameras.
The speed camera bandit failing to appear in court, confirmed by the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. Daniel Currens is facing at least 3 felony theft charges and 3 more misdemeanor destruction of property charges after after investigators say he stole 5 speed cameras from across the city during a 6-week period starting this past July. Earlier today, attorney Kurt Nachman, who is not associated with the case, weighed in on the potential consequences Currens could face.
I think it depends a lot on prior criminal history. It's going to depend on, whether or not he's able to make some kind of restitution to the city for these cameras and whatever damage may have occurred to them. All of those things are going to come into play when determining what an appropriate sentence is.
But Currens now back on the run.
According to California.gov, Governor Gavin Newsom, joined by Attorney General Rob Bonta, signed multiple new measures into law, including AB 28, that efforts to generate $160 million annually by raising the standard ammunition eligibility check $4. Modoc County Sheriff William Dowdy expressed his opposition to the new raise in the SAEC, saying the pressure needs to be taken off law-abiding citizens and put on criminals.
Obtaining those guns illegally. And again, I think the consequences for those subjects needs to be more severe.
He says he hopes the public will express their opposition in the tax increase, since many people in the North State use firearms and ammunition for self-defense and recreation.
In California right now. And this is just another tax to discourage people from exercising their right.
There was no shortage of strong opinions today as the public got its first chance to tell the State Board of Education how it feels about merging Bible teachings with elementary school reading lessons.
We should not be teaching these stories in public school like they are factually accurate.
The president of Texas Values disputes that, saying those arguing against the curriculum want to censor the ability to talk about the Bible and its significance in America.
They want to rewrite history. They want to erase history and convince you that Christianity has no value or has had nothing to do with the founding of our country. And what we also see happening today is a focus on censoring Christianity, not any of the other religions that will be taught as a part of these programs.
Coming up, changing priorities, the changes the new Starbucks CEO wants to make and how it could impact your experience. Looking ahead to stories making headlines this week, a series of public hearings on the implosion of the Titan submersible are set to begin. They're a part of the Coast Guard's investigation into why the sub imploded last summer. 2 Uvalde school police officers are back in court on Monday. They're accused of failing to take action during the 2022 Robb Elementary School shooting. Next week also marks the start of oral arguments in TikTok's legal challenge against the U.S. government. The platform's owner, ByteDance, is fighting a measure that would require the sale of the platform or a U.S. ban. Come and stay a while at Starbucks. That's the goal of the new CEO, Brian Niccol. He wants to bring the company back to its roots as a traditional coffee house. He said that starts with new design and the comfortable seats that went away as the chain moved from a traditional sit-down coffee shop to more of a to-go experience. Those changes contributed to the company's decline in sales. The White House welcomed 2 national championship winning teams this week. President Biden honored the 2024 NCAA basketball champs, Connecticut and South Carolina. UConn, led by their coach Dan Hurley, was the first team to win back-to-back titles since the 2007 Florida Gators after finishing the season with a 37-3 record. For South Carolina, they capped off a brilliant 38-0 season to capture the team's 3rd NCAA championship title since Coach Don Staley's arrival in 2017. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live From 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of The National Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.